I'm going to go interview with Gene Roddenberry. So sure enough, I did. I went up there the next day. He had been working out of his home because he had finished his project at Warner Brothers, and his secretary, who was a career secretary, had decided that he had too many benefits at Warner Brothers, his health plan and this and that, and he wanted to stay with Warner Brothers. And so Gene was secretary-less. And that was how I ended up getting the job. It was his birthday. I went up to the house where he was working, and I remember he was eating a yogurt out of a paper cup, and that was his birthday lunch, and I thought, this is a cool man. So I gave him my secretarial resume, which he shoved in a desk drawer and never read, ever. To this day, I know that he had never read it. We used to joke about it a lot. I don't know whatever happened to it, but I was always afraid if he did, I would lose my job. So I ended up working closely with him for about 17 and a half years. Not close to 20, as it says in the program, but it's a good chunk of my life. So it was a most wonderful experience that I can imagine. So I hope that answers your question. a little long-winded, but yes. Yeah. Oh, this gentleman back here. You. Yes.
When Gene was creating his Star Trek universe, what was his main influences for creating Star Trek? Like, was Forbidden Planet, because it's very like his universe?
I've heard this asked before, and I don't know that it was a conscious. From what I asked him about this once, I said, "Did you rip off Forbidden Planet?" I just asked him, and he said, "No, why?" I said, "Well, they had a captain, a first officer, and a medical officer, and but I think that was kind of a good way to go if you're going to create a good core group, a good group of characters to be at the helm of any good ship. It may have been a subliminal influence. I know that you are a product of just about everything you've ever seen, and if you go to create something, no one creates in a vacuum. You see things in dramatic terms. You see where conflict can come in, and saw this group of men who would be in conflict. You would have the captain who has to be strong and make tough decisions, and Gene had been an airline captain, so he knew about captaincy. And then the logical Vulcan, it was almost like a split personality that Kirk had. He's saying, you must do this, Jim, because this is the logical thing to do. And then you have the conflict of McCoy, yes, but the humanity, you must do this. And so you create characters with more than just, gee, I think I'll put in a captain and a doctor and a first officer. The adventures in space were simply his adventures as a pilot, amplified, taken, as he always said, the brave captain that he wished he could have been, or the brave pilot. So there's a lot of input in that. His boyhood, he read a lot of science fiction, and this made an impression upon him. From what I understand from his daughter, they were sitting around a campfire when she was a little girl in Yosemite National Park, of all places, because if you saw Star Trek V, they used that as a setting. But this is the truth. At least this is what his daughter Dawn has told me. They were sitting around the campfire, and he was spinning stories for his kids of space travels, because he had to keep the children amused. They were, 7, 8 years old. And his wife, Eileen, whom he was married to for 27 years, said, those are very, very good stories. Why don't you think about producing or putting together a series, or taking these stories and making a series about them? And that was sort of the germ of the idea.
live here in Glasgow. Where? So you're from Germany. So you came all the way from Germany. This is Petra. How long did it take to get here? You flew over by plane? How long the flight was that? From Germany. 4 hours from the Frankfurt. Berlin? You carry. Hi, how are you? Just right. And this is starting to die. Pleasure. Good to see you. Thank you very much. I hope you do too. Well, thank you, whoever introduced this.
His son Rod, now 18 as of February, graduated this year from high school, and that was held outdoors. And Magel's biggest concern was that he was going to use a squirt gun to get the principal of the school as he went on stage to get his diploma. He didn't, but he did shoot his friends as they got theirs. Let's see, what else has happened? They've started 6th season. I mentioned that yesterday. We haven't talked much about Star Trek 7, but there's not much to talk about. Actually, they've looked at a couple of scripts, both written by people that you know, but not much to say. Again, I think they're waiting to see what kind of continued receipts they get on it. Deep Space Nine, the sets at this point are mostly constructed on stages 4, 17, and 18 at Paramount. They haven't dressed them yet. They're just the raw lumber. It looks pretty boring right now. But they've got the main command center on stage 4 and some quarters. And on stage 17, they've got the big sort of promenade area, which 18 is going to be the costumes for the Next Generation is doing the costumes for Deep Space Nine. Michael Cooter and Rick Sternbach are both working both series up in the art department. Who else is working both? Richard James, who's the set designer for the Next Generation, is not working on Deep Space Nine as well. That is Herman Zimmerman. What else can I tell you? They're in the casting process right now. The same casting people, Junie Lowry and Ron Surma, are casting. And so far, they only have Colin Meaney absolutely locked in for Deep Space Nine. Michelle Forbes backed out and will not be continuing in the role of Ro in the 6th season. What else can I tell you about 9? Let's get into the questions. You probably know more about what you want to know than I do. Standing at the back.
Got the microphone.
Ooh.
Which of the original cast do not have stars on the Hollywood Boulevard?
Jimmy Doohan and Walter Koenig are the only two who don't have stars there, and they've both been nominated and selected for this year. So this year being from summer to summer. So sometime between now and next summer, we should both get their stars, which will be then all 7 of them on the Hollywood Boulevard. What about any of the Next Generation? LeVar Burton got his last year, and the only thing I remember about that ceremony, other than it being on the south side of the street, because everybody else is on the north side of the street, was that just before Gene got up to give his little speech, probably the loosest pigeon I've ever known in my life, who was on a garage rooftop right above us, unloaded itself all over Gene's dark blue suit. And this was seconds before. And Ernie and myself, and I can't remember who else was there, rushed to get as much off as possible before Gene got up there. I'm a pacifist, but if I'd had a shotgun, that pigeon's ass would have been unbelievable timing. No, nobody else. I mean, the only people who have qualifications, if you will, outside of Star Trek would probably be Will Wheaton and, no, that's it. Because Will had a fairly legitimate film career, as LeVar had a fairly legitimate television career prior to Next Generation. Everybody else was pretty new. Of course, as far as I'm concerned, they should all get them now, but that's different. Sorry? Patrick, no. Patrick was hardly a household name prior to Star Trek. He's not the sort of person who you'd give a star to. You know, somebody who played 4th and 5th roles in Dune and Excalibur and that brilliant film Life Force. You don't get a star on Hollywood Boulevard to. Other questions? Yes? I'm definitely going to need the microphone for this one.
Have you ever thought about putting on the theatre?
Ever thought about putting on a theatre?
No, the show on theatre. Doing a run.
Can somebody explain that question? Putting the show on in a theatre? As a play. Oh, putting Star Trek on as a play. Oh, Lord. They tried to get it going as an opera, and... Oh, I'm serious. The New York City Opera Company was all but licensed to do a Star Trek opera, but they were going to do it serious Wagnerian opera. And, at first Gene was like, why not? And then I think later on I don't think Star Trek has ever taken itself quite this seriously. I think maybe if it had been more like a Gilbert and Sullivan or something, but not so, dreary, serious as the sort of thing that they appeared to be looking at. So that was canceled. They almost did an ice rink show, Star Trek on Ice. They tried to put together a Star Trek circus. Ladies and gentlemen, in all ages, the cast of... Oh, kind of been awful. They tried to do an arena show that was going to travel around to various cities with the cast on stage simply doing skits, singing, dancing, Bill Shatner live singing. And that didn't work out either. As for a play, have you heard about the Brady Bunch? In the States, they now have plays in more than one city, and the cast are using the actual episodic scripts from the Brady Bunch. I suppose you could do Star Trek as a play, but how would you handle the special effects? Have you seen Forbidden Planet in London, the play? Some of you have. Raise your hands. Yeah, a few of you have. It's a wonderful play, but where it kind of lacks, I think, a little bit is in the special effects area. The music's wonderful, and the performers I saw were tireless, amazing. But I think that's maybe, with science fiction, you need a little more there. Little Shop of Horrors was a different matter. That was a wonderful production. It could happen, it just hasn't yet. Somebody would have to come up with a very clever way to do it.
Thank you very much. Are you enjoying the convention? It's really a fantastic and very well organized convention, despite the fact that we're running always a little bit late. And I must apologize for having contributed to that myself. Yesterday, I was enjoying myself so much up here, and George is so kind. He's so reluctant to be firm. He kept giving me extra 5 minutes, saying, I've got to quit in 5 minutes. He did that about 5 times. So that meant 25 minutes. And I'm told later that I went over something like 45 minutes, and he's been very kind and whittled that down to 25 minutes. I told him he's got to get a bullwhip so that he can crack it. And I will respond to that. Or... like everybody else? In Hollywood, the sign that they give you is not this. It's this. I understand that. So I'll try to keep to the schedule a little bit better today. But, I love this city of Glasgow. It has been... What? Did someone say something? Oh, I thought you were commenting. I'm still a little jet lagged. And please forgive me if more than a couple of times over the last 2-3 days I've said here in England, I know much better, and one doesn't say that one is an Anglophile in Scotland. It's Britannophile, right? That's the term. And I've even made reference to Irish whiskey here. I mean, I blame it on the jet lag. Yes, it's really terrible, this thing called jet lag. I've gotten it 3 times this morning already. And another symptom of jet lag is one loses one's thought. I was starting to talk about something and I've forgotten what it was I wanted to say. So do be very patient with me. But I've been roaming around this city and I made this dazzling discovery called Prince's Square. I'm told that it was just another open courtyard only a few years back, and they've made it into this really fantastic place to while away some time, an elegant space. I think it really shows the imagination and sensitivity and a sense of urban style of the people here in Glasgow to create something like that. Bought a box of shortbread biscuits there, and I was telling people about that, and I told them what we paid, and she said, "Oh, good God, why do you do something like that? I could have baked something for you for a fraction of that cost." But you know, that really is an amazing urban statement, and I'm really enjoying roaming through the city and seeing the old Victorian architecture, as well as how some space has been adaptively reused as a contemporary piece of contribution to the urban statement. I must tell you, right before I left home for this trip, I happened to be talking to Jimmy Doohan. I called him, and he told me that he got a part in an upcoming episode of The Next Generation. He starts shooting in August for 8 days, and he hadn't received the script, so he couldn't say anything about it, not even the title, but he was awfully excited and looking forward to that, so do watch for Jimmy. He did tell me that he's not going to be aged, so it's probably going to be a holodeck kind of thing, or something where he won't have to play an old, wizened, ancient Scotty. So with that preface, let me open it up for a dial. Yes? Oh, it's here. Oh, yes, we get to do something that's really going to be unusual. We're going to mark this convention in a concrete way. This young man, what's your name?
Baggy. Could be John Bathgate, but usually it's Baggy.
Oh, Baggy. Came up with a great idea. I was talking about putting our handprint in concrete on the forecourt of the Chinese Theatre in Hollywood. Well, he came up with the idea of doing that here in Glasgow, and so he made arrangements to have a square of concrete brought here, and I'm going to put my handprint and autograph in the square and mark this occasion. This is what, July 20th, isn't it? 19th. That's what jet lag does. July 19th, 1992, here in Glasgow, Scotland, is going to be marked in concrete. I'm now making a permanent impression on the landscape of Scotland as well. And what is your name?
Nick. And you're with the construction crew outside?
Marble fixer.
A marble fixer. And are you working on a project here? You are. What project is that?
Grosvenor House.
Grosvenor House.
That's the hotel, is it?
No, it used to be the hotel.
It's an office block. And Baggy, how do you intend to use it? Well, that's what he said his name was. Actually, John something, right?
John Bathgate.
John Bathgate. But he prefers Baggy. How are we going to use this chunk of concrete?
Well, I thought about Baggy's Chinese Theatre in Jedburgh.
Real impresario. Instead of the Grauman's Chinese Theatre, we're going to have a Baggy's Chinese Theatre right here in Glasgow, Scotland.
Actually in the Borders, that's where I'm from, in Jedburgh.
Is that in Glasgow?
No, it's about 50 miles, 60 miles from here.
Oh, I see. So we're going to have to...
No, it's definitely in Scotland, yes.
Is that the crossroads of Scotland?
It's near the border. I don't know if you've been around any of the border towns, Melrose, Galashiels, Kelso.
I know Melrose in Los Angeles.
555.
You've got it memorized. Now, that looks fantastic. In the water. Okay. Do we do it on the floor? Oh. Well, that's the way we did it in Hollywood. We got on our knees. They had a board. What?
Do the signature on the other side. Do the palm print on one side and do the signature on the other side.
Yeah. I'd sit down a bit further. What's it next? Dip your hand.
Get a glass of water.
And then when you wet, you need my autograph.
Let's do that. We'll use that.
Now you're going to build a theater, Rob.
Oh yeah. Well, bamboo growing in my garden.
Oh yeah. Well, there are no bamboos in Contagion. Palm trees. Palm trees. No, we have towels. This is why. Can we display this here? Grab the other way.
We have marked this occasion here. Thank you, Baggy, for coming up with that idea. Now, hurry up and build that theater, and I'll come for the opening. The Star Trek films. He's done magnificently, and he's set a high standard. I have directed in theater, but not in films, and particularly with Star Trek. It's not just directing actors and working with a script. There's so much special effects involved, so much of the technical involved, and Leonard is really an amazing Renaissance man. He's able to deal with directors very intimately and profoundly. He's able to turn around and deal with the technical people, special effects people, and then he's able to turn around and deal with the lighting people, and then he's able to turn around and get in front of the camera and act. He's an absolutely amazing guy. I really marvel at all of the talents that he's got, plus his enormous energy reserve, because acting and directing on the same project is incredibly demanding. You have to, as a director, prepare for the day's work before the day's work begins. And as an actor, one has to prepare, have the lines ready, and have a concept of how you want to do that scene. And with just acting, there's an enormous hunk of preparation, but when you're acting, you're in front of the camera and you do your thing, and then you get to sit around and rest or complain or sip coffee or visit with everybody and more or less kind of recover. But as a director, you have to be on your feet, functioning all the time. It takes tremendous energy, and Leonard has that incredible reserve of energy. I asked his wife, what time does Leonard get to bed, and what time does he wake up in the morning back home? And he says, she told me that he's working until about 10 o'clock at night in his preparation. He goes to bed. He's up at 3 in the morning and gets a bite to eat, and then he works on the immediate preparation for the directorial part. The car's there to pick him up at 4. He's in makeup, and while he's in makeup, he's working on the acting part of it. He's working on the lines and the approach that he wants to get. And then he's the first one on the set, giving directions to the crew. It's really an enormously demanding challenge, and very few people can be successful taking on a challenge like that. And only Leonard has been successful doing it. I think I'd like to direct a film, but not Star Trek, because it's so demanding. And I also know where one can fail very easily. Civilization is dependent on so many things, and at the core of it is a common subscription to a set of moral values, and I'd like to think that that's what Star Trek stood for. And that's why, with people like Star Trek fans, people who subscribe to the ideals of Star Trek, that's the hope for our society and our civilization. It's regrettable that we have such difficulties in our world today, but that's because the ideals of Star Trek isn't shared by enough people in our society, and particularly the political leadership of our government. In the uniform.
This might have been asked yesterday, I couldn't make the talk. Star Trek 6 showed us that, like Captain Kirk, you're willing to bend the rules. You've told us what you'd like to incorporate of the different characters. I was just wondering, when you get your chance to carry on with Captain Sulu, are you going to play him as a sort of gung-ho Captain Kirk, or will he be more stand-backish to look at the situation before he charges in?
Well, Sulu will be his own man. Certainly his hero is Captain Kirk. He spent 25 long years. And so a lot of Kirk will be a part of Sulu, but Sulu is also his own character, and he has his own idiosyncrasies also. You saw his proclivity for a little swashbuckling, and he has a little impetuousness about him as well. That wasn't just an aberration that you saw in Naked Time, and maybe even in the negative character, the flip side of the good Sulu that we know and love, that we saw in Mirror Mirror. There's a little bit of him as well. So he won't be the total formal, by-the-books kind of captain. There'll be some interesting, surprising, impetuous aspects about Sulu as well. And that's why I think we need at least 10 more movies before we can really get to say we know all of the dimensions of Sulu. And I have just been given the high side by my whip-cracking master here. So let me thank you again for a very, very good session. We'll have an autograph session a little bit later. Enjoy the convention. Thank you. Oh, I'm not leaving yet.